Art of Anarchy. Tell us a little bit about that band, because there was a time Scott Weiland from Stone Temple was the singer. And that kind of fell apart or something.
So in 2011, Disturbed took a extended hiatus. Okay. We were just like, we're taking a break. And so it was like, all right, what am I going to do now? You know? So it was kind of like license for me to like, I don't know, join some other bands, see what else is out there. So I did Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and I started doing these other things, and word kind of starts getting out about me. And I did a couple different side projects. One of them was the band Art of Anarchy. So there's these two brothers out of Long Island, twin brothers, guitar player and drummer, and they had been working with Thal, Bumblefoot from Guns N' Roses. You know, later on Guns N' Roses. And obviously, if you know anything about Ron, he's a shredder. Like that guy is
virtuoso.
Like freaking mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And he has perfect pitch, and he's the sweetest, coolest dude in the world. And he's a hell of a producer too. So he's been producing music with these guys. So they got together a pretty good grouping of material for this record. And the brothers had some backing, so that, you know, they had money. And so they reached out to Scott Weiland. I guess Scott wasn't doing anything, and they convinced Scott Weiland to sing on the record. And then they reached out to me. I mean, they go, hey man, you know, we're this band out of Long Island. We got Thal, Bumblefoot playing and producing for us, and we got Scott Weiland singing. Would you like to play bass? I'm like, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
So I flew out, met the guys in person, played all over the record. Weiland sang on it, but Weiland sang on it in his studio with his producer in LA. Okay. There was never really any interaction during the making of the record.
Okay.
So we're trying to put together, you know, a label deal and all this. We get a deal, and, you know, they're thinking, oh, this is going to be a super group. This is going to be easy money. You know, we'll get these guys on the road, whatever. Well, Weiland's head wasn't in it. He, for some reason, thought he could sing on a record and not tour it, or he could sing in a band and not be in the band. But it doesn't really work when you're on his level. Like, no, that's your band now. Like, that's, you know. So he even did. So I only met him once. We did videos. So we had 2 video shoots that we did over like a 3 or 4 day period in LA. And that was the only time I really had any interaction with him. And even that was very limited. But the record that we did is really good. And it was Scott Weiland's last performance before he died, last performance on record before he died. And although he wasn't the lion that he used to be, like when you listen to like Dead and Bloated, and, you know, some of those early STP records where he was just like powerful. He wasn't powerful, but he was soulful, and he was beautiful, and he was deep. I don't know how to describe it. It was like, you know, I know this is a stretch maybe for some of our listeners. So Billie Holiday, during her later years, you know, she had a bad heroin addiction. Mm-hmm. And you could hear it in her voice, this loneliness, this soulfulness. And I'm not recommending people do heroin, but what I am saying is some artists who have that, who are on it and perform on it, there is like a quality to their voice that is indescribable. And that's what I heard in Weiland's voice on our last record. He had this, you could tell it was going to be his last record. It was like his swan song, and it was so powerful. It's a really good record. Highly recommend it. Art of Anarchy's first record. We had great artwork on it. The whole thing was great. We had, you know, we had support labeling, but the Scott Weiland didn't want to do it. So that kind of kills it, right?
Yeah. What's the title of that album? Is it
it's just self-titled? That one's just self-titled. And then for some reason we decided to do it again with another Scott. We did it with Scott Stapp from Creed.
Right. Okay.
On this record, I did a lot more writing. The record's called The Madness. That was a tough record to make. A lot of like just sitting in the jam room with Scott Stapp and Bumble and the whole band, and just trying to get everybody on the same page, and trying to, I was in a super creative zone at that point. So I brought in a ton of songs. I probably wrote half that record. And, you know, it was good. It was difficult working with Stapp because he's, you know, you just don't know which Stapp you're going to get. Like some days you're going to get creative Stapp, and some days you're going to get the Stapp who just wants to sit in the corner and say everything sucks. So, you know, he was kind of moody. And, you know, he was only into it so much. It was very frustrating. It was like dragging an elephant uphill, you know, sometimes. So, you know, I don't mind saying this, you know, because it turned into an entire shit show. He you know, he was supposed to do, we signed to a label again. We were supposed to do, I think he was promised to do 90 shows with us. He did 6 and then bailed. So, wow. And that was all in the contract. Like I can talk about this because it's already, it's, I'm not going to put out too much, but we are in a dispute with him legally. And, you know, that's already been around. So, you know, I'm not like letting the cat out of the bag or saying anything that hadn't been already told in the press years ago. So it's been years, but we're getting to the end of that dispute. It's frustrating because when you get into a band, you trust people. It's, I want to say it's like a marriage, but it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, when somebody's in that relationship and they're not being truthful and they're there under false reasons and, you know, they're already planning an exit plan when you're buying the house and they're trying to figure out a way to, you know, ditch you, you know, it hurts. So I'm a trusting person. I'm not going to say I'm naive, but I refuse to get hardened. The music industry will break your heart. There's a reason that Sims Foundation exists because it is not a mentally friendly industry. So, you know, but I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. I'm not going to allow myself to get hardened by things. So like, even though the thing with Scott Weiland didn't work out, even though Disturb was on hiatus, even though I had dealt with the losses in Union Underground, you know, a lot of heartbreak, I was still like, all right, Scott Stapp, let's go, you know, fresh and as a daisy and willing to do it, even though he didn't have a great history coming into the camp. He'd just come off of his whole thing where he was traveling across the country in the back of a truck, homeless, you know, and he's telling us all these stories and he's just back sober. So we're his sober camp. We're supporting him. There is no drinking. What do you need, Scott Stapp, to make this work? All hands on deck. We believe in you. We want you to be a part of this. You're going to agree to this? Awesome.
Yeah.
And then and then you put all that into somebody and they turn their back on you. I don't really have a lot of remorse for that. It really hurt my feelings. I want to say my feelings. It hurt my soul because I put a lot into that record and he had no intention of touring it. And it's come out now, like so much has come out in the wash that I'm just like, I just can't believe the things that were said that weren't true. So there's that story.
Yeah. I bring it up.
I'm going to get in trouble for this. Some lawyer's going to call me and be like, you can't bash, blah, 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 blah.
I don't think you bashed anybody.
I'm just telling the truth, man. It just sucked.
Yeah.
You know, promises were made. They weren't kept. And I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do that to you, Jason. I wouldn't do that to you, David. You know, I wouldn't do that to anybody. And how people can go through life and do that and think it's okay because they're somebody is the worst kind of rock star ego I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything we've learned about you in this conversation, it's that you have a history of learning from adversity. So, you know, these
unfortunately.
Yeah, well, you know, you could say unfortunately, but I think even you would look in the mirror and say, I took something valuable away from those experiences, even if I learned what not to do and how not to behave, and that'll serve you well going forward. Another project I wanted to talk about, because again, you've worked with some pretty amazing people, and that's Adrenaline Mob. You'd worked with Mike Portnoy in that band. And then after Portnoy steps aside, in comes AJ Pero from Twisted Sister. So 2 great drummers that you got to work with. Tell us a little bit about Adrenaline Mob.